appropriate, a more subdued. That's right. I don't know if you've heard we are at war with Iraq, or as it's officially known in Washington, Operation Enduring Wolf Blitzer. Now, so far, as of this is Friday night, so far things going well, thank God for our side. The Iraqis seem to be folding like a cheap burqa. We are taking a lot of prisoners, and they are being, in case they have bombs, they are being stripped and handcuffed, which may explain why today Bruce Valanche volunteered. My gaydar is up on him. No, I tell you, war is on everybody's mind. Last night, Nick Nolte got pulled over. He told the police he wasn't bombed. He was just liberating his liver. And, of course, the situation with the Oscars, still up in the air. They think they're going to go on, but they're not sure. And if they do, they're going to be subdued. None of this is easy on the stars. Winona Ryder today called up and said, please decide on a mood. I need to know what pills to bring. The security at the Oscars very tight this year. A special military unit is coming in and sweeping the theater for chemical and biological agents. I just hope the Botox doesn't set off their instruments. Because no, there is a lot of Botox out here. I was at a pre-Oscar party last night, and I tell you, I have not seen this much botulism in one place since I worked at Del Taco. Couple of Del Taco veterans right there. And breast implants. My God, the only person there at the party with real boobs was Michael Moore, I tell you. And his buddy Charlton Heston was there at the board. He got upset because Harrison Ford and Callista Flockhart walked in, and they looked like Moses and his staff. All right, you're a very good crowd. At a difficult time. You know, I want to introduce right now our special guests for this evening's show. They are three military veterans who have fought in 4 different wars for this country in the last century, and I wanted them on tonight as a way of saying that with the events of this week, this situation now is really about the soldiers. The arguments we've been having for these last months about whether to do this or not are now simply dated. War has begun, so let us turn our attention and our empathy to those who now carry the burden of this battle. And here to help me with that, please welcome them now, are Delphine Metcalf Foster, Ward Payne, and Shad Meshad. Hey, how you doing? Pleasure to have you here. Wonderful. Nice to see you. Thank you very much. Give them a hand. Okay. All right. So, before we begin, let me get your branch. I think you're all from the Army, right? You all served in that? Okay.
Yes.
And the war you fought in the rank? First sergeant you retired as? You fought in the Gulf War.
On the Gulf War.
Okay. That's Delphine. Shad, you were in Vietnam, of course. You retired as a captain, as did you, Ward, and you fought in both World War II and Korea.
Yes, sir.
All right. Obviously, these are different wars. The people who fight in them and fought in them have different feelings, but they must have certain things in common. As I said, this is really about the soldiers now. What are these guys and women going through right now over there?
They're going through hell.
Yeah.
They don't know the environment, as I didn't know environment 12 years ago. They're coming from a comfort zone of a nice bed, going to sandstorms.
But wait, they've been in sandstorms now for a while. Haven't they been over there?
But they still never get used to that.
Right.
You don't get used to that.
No.
You don't get used to 5 o'clock in the morning getting up and it's 120-degree weather.
Right.
You never get used to that. Your whole mental capacity gets changed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think people focus, as well they should, on the real hell of war, the death, the injury, and the fear, forgetting about the fact that even if you took that away, none of us could take it. Just the discomfort. This is not Survivor Fort Dix. What was the greatest discomfort? Forget about the terror and the horror. What about just the discomfort that you all went through, that you hated, the thing you hated the most?
Well, I was a Southern California boy, and in the Ardennes in Europe, it was below zero temperature almost all the time, and a little bit difficult to get used to that. But,
so the cold. What about you?
In Vietnam, it was 120 degrees. It was the humidity was always 100%. You had three-steppers. You had all types of pit vipers that they told you about, that you had 3 seconds after they bit you. You had triple canopy jungle. You could never see 3 feet in front of you when you were in the bush. And there was an enemy you could hardly ever see. It was always sniping and taking out.
And the bad side? No.
Not enough.
I guess
not enough UFO
war
shows.
is just hell wherever you are.
Yes, it is.
Now your war, World War II, you're called the greatest generation. I'm wondering what you guys think about that, and I'm wondering whether you've what.
well, it's very complimentary.
Yeah.
And I do think that our generation did go through quite a bit. They were mostly children of the Depression, and that had just seemingly got over with, and then we come to World War II, and so I'm proud of our generation.
Were they the greatest to start with, or did the war make them that?
That's a good question, Bill. I would say that the war certainly proved them. I'm not sure we were the greatest at the start of that, no.
Yeah. And what do you guys think? Is that the greatest generation? Do you guys have a...
I don't think there's any great generation. I think they're all great generations. I think soldiers they're the most unbelievable human beings because of what they have to experience. Most of society doesn't experience what soldiers do, whether it was World War II, whether it was Vietnam, Korea, Bosnia, where they are now, the push right now as we speak. It's just horrific, and it's life-altering no matter who. And I think that it's a great group of people that don't get credit, and particularly after they leave. My life's dedicated to veterans.
Not enough. That's true. The difference, of course, now is that we don't seem to ask the home front to do a lot. I want to show you a poster from World War II, if we could show this up on the monitor now. Do you remember this one word at all? When you ride alone, you ride with Hitler? Because...
No, that's a new one on me.
Oh. Well, that was an old one. I used that and other posters to put out a book recently because I thought no one's putting out the kind of posters they put out during World War II to ask people to sacrifice. And I know they did that in your era, World War II. People at home were asked to do all sorts of things. Why is it, do you think, that the governments nowadays, of both parties, are afraid to ask people to pitch in?
Well, I feel, first of all, they're not as patriotic as World War II veterans were. And I feel like they don't know really what is going on in the wars. They don't know their history. History has a habit, to me, of repeating itself.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of young people these days really don't know what has happened. When we mention World War II, I think about my father, who was in the Spanish-American War, who was in an all-black regiment, 9th Cavalry. If you mention that to your average college student today, they don't know anything about it.
No.
And so unless you know anything about your history, unless you know anything about your history, you are going to repeat it.
That's true. I mean, wars today this war we hope is over quickly. The first Gulf War took a short amount of time. We're measuring them in weeks and months, if that. World War II took 7 years, and then you went back to Korea. Do you think this generation now has the stomach, or we as the population at home, to stick with a war for that kind of time?
I think it's pretty surreal. I think that the youth today, they watch it like they almost watch video games. It's so high-tech.
Right.
And it's on right now, and you can watch it, and it almost looks like special effects in a movie, just like 9/11. I don't think that they really understand the impact unless they've been in harm's way, and I think that that's the big problem.
Right.
When I was teaching at UCSB, the famous class on Vietnam many years ago, we did it for 20 years. We used to pull history books out at high school, and they would be maybe 10 pages on the Vietnam War. It was our longest war, actually. It was 10 years, and there was maybe 10 pages, and it said nothing about our war.
Yeah. Let me show you a poster. Now, this is one of the ones I made up for the new war that we're fighting. And tell me what you think of this. It shows an Army guy, a cop, a police, fire guy. It says, "We say they're our heroes, as we always do, but we pay them like chumps." What do you think of that?
Well, being the junior vice commander for the Disabled American Veterans, I believe that is very true. The troops today, they'll come home, as we did, with injuries, and the money's not there for the hospitals. Health care is being cut down. We went to Congress last month to beg for our health care. Now, why should we go to war and come home and no one is there for us to give us proper health care?
But here's where I see, this is where the disconnect is. This is where I see we have to find where the bridge is, because everyone applauds that. If I said right now we should pay these guys and everybody in the armed services more, everybody would applaud. And yet somehow it doesn't get done. How do we bridge that gap between that feeling that it should get done? Where is that breaking down?
I think instead of all the protesting, I think we should protest some of the senators. I think we should go to the senators, the congressmen, your local officials. We should write. We should get these emails out. We should call them. We should let them know. You want these offices? You help us veterans. We're there for you. You are there for us. They are making the money. We can make a difference, but it takes numbers. It doesn't take one or two veterans to do that. It takes the whole you don't have to be a veteran to do that.
But it comes down to taxes, doesn't it? I mean, somewhere along the line, they collect taxes, and it's what they decide to spend that tax money on, and how much people decide they don't want to pay taxes.
The interesting thing is right now, veterans are hot. They're on TV. The soldiers are out there. They're interviewing.
They're not on Are You Hot, though?
I like that, Bill.
Very inappropriate.
Very dusty.
Laser pointer. Oh, there's the Battle of the Bulge going on right there.
Guarantee you.
That's a good one.
Guaranteed, as soon as it's over, just like with the Gulf War, just like with this lady here, just as it's over, then all of a sudden they're lost. They're lost in space. It's like yesterday, the House Veterans Affairs Committee in the House voted 22-18 to cut $26 billion out of veterans' health care and homeless and all these big programs nationwide. And it's going to the Senate for a vote. And yet they're talking on TV about we're sending our youngest, our brightest, our biggest heroes in society. And yet when these kids come back, there's not going to be anything. There's nothing for our veterans now. I mean, I run a national hotline, and I listen to people, families, friends, and children every day complain that the resources are dwindling. And yet we're sitting here saluting and elevating these men right now, but there won't be anything when they come back.
Do you trust the Pentagon? You trust the Pentagon, Ward?
I do, yes, sir. I have a little different outlook than Shad. I live in a retirement community, and some of us are getting along in years a little bit. And I've heard some very fine things about the care that veterans are getting in the Veterans Administration hospitals. I go down there with my Legion friends about, every once in a while to Long Beach. And I think the care is outstanding. And that was not always the case.
But that's not, I'm not disagreeing with you. They're talking about cutting 9,000 doctors in the next few years, 19,000 nurses, 186,000 nursing care homes for our veterans. They're cutting the VA. This is what I'm talking about. I don't disagree with you. I want that service to continue. It needs to be enhanced.
Let me just ask you one final question. Can anything good come of war? We're in one now.
Let your officials know you're not going to go for it.
Sure.
We're going to take care of the veterans.
Yeah.
We're going to take care of them when they come back to fight a country for us.
I want to show you one good thing that came of war, if you like me anyway. This is my parents met in World War II. You'll be happy to know this. I hope you may have.
Very happy.
That's my mother, was a Army nurse.
Oh.
And there's my father. And I wanted to ask you, Ward, would you look at that picture? Where do you look at that jacket he's wearing? Where did he liberate that? What? That does not look like standard issue. Did you guys lift a lot of things when you were over there?
A little bit.
I'm sure they did. Yeah.
Give these guys a hand. Thank you so much for everything you did.
Thank you.
And what you continue to do. Thank you so much. I appreciate you being here. Okay. Our panel will be out here in just a moment, and we're live, so I'll be taking your phone calls and audience questions. We have some great musicians here tonight, Grant Lee Phillips and John Bryan. And, of course, our feature story, as it does every week, comes from our own America's friend, Mr. Paul F. Tompkins. Say hello to him now. Tell us what you have for us tonight there, sir.
Well, Bill, we'll be taking a look at this Sunday's Oscars. So far, as of today, the Academy Awards are scheduled to be broadcast right on schedule this Sunday. But they have said that it may be preempted up to the last second if the war becomes even more intense. Now, some say if the Oscars are postponed, then the terrorists win. But even if they don't, it's an honor just to be nominated. Bill?
All right, thank you very much. Paul Tompkins will be with us shortly. Right now, it's time to meet our all-star panel. There they are when he's not writing a column for the Daily Standard, which I love, by the way, or promoting his new movie, Christopher Guest, A Mighty Win. My first guest fills his time by simply being my very good friend, Larry Miller, ladies and gentlemen. And over here we have a civil rights attorney with us on our last show very often, an activist, Connie, not Condi Rice, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming by. And of course, you know this guy, his theater company Actors Gang is staging the play Orlando here in LA, and you can see him in the new Clint Eastwood flick, Mystic River, Mr. Tim Robbins. Now, Tim, I couldn't help noticing that you're wearing your opinions there right on your shirt.
Oh my God, I didn't even notice.
I want to ask you this right off the bat.
Got it from the Pope.
Oh, what does he know? It says, "What would Jesus bomb?" But now we've had 6 months, everyone has really, to argue whether we should go into this war. And now that it has begun, it is my opinion that things have changed. It means that those arguments are sort of over. And I would ask you if you would agree with that, that one, not only should we just say, okay, the arguments about whether we should have done this or not are moot, but two, we support our troops. I'm sure everyone thinks that way. But also, now that it's going on, you kind of have to root for the plan to work, don't you? I mean, I don't know whether they were right about this, but now that we're doing it, don't you have to say, you know, I hope this does transform the Middle East. I hope it does bring democracy there. Whatever the plan was, I hope I was wrong about it, and I mean that sincerely.
And I hope there's no innocent civilians killed, and I hope, dear God, that there's very, very low casualties in American troops. But the problem is, you know, when is it appropriate to oppose a war? Let's put it in Vietnam, for example. When was it appropriate to say no to the Vietnam War? After 5 deaths? After 500? After 5,000? When is it appropriate?
Well,
what year?
Well, since wars nowadays don't take that kind of time, can't you give it a week? I mean, is it not?
Personally, no. You know, I don't see the logic in opposing a war, and then once it starts saying, okay, it's okay now. Now that we're actually bombing, you know, I'm okay. I'm for it.
Look, we can hold two thoughts in one head, okay?
Yeah.
All right?
Sometimes we can.
Yeah, sometimes. A couple of times we can, Bill. Look, we're in the field. Our troops are dying. Iraqis are dying. It's a very serious time. We support the troops no matter what. They don't set the policy. They don't elect to go to war just because they choose to.
Right.
They're ordered there, and we've got to support them. You can do that at the same time. You've got to ask the question. No, it's not too late. You've got to examine this. We have just set a new standard for going to war as a matter of choice to prevent something on the off chance that it might happen. That is serious. We've got to look at that. We've got to examine it because we could be doing this again. I don't think the questions ever stop being asked. You got to ask them now, and you got to ask them forward at the same time you support the troops.
Well, yeah. Well, first of all, I'm astonished that you can hold two thoughts at one time, because I think right there. Look, of course, any question asked, that's why we're Americans, you can ask it at any time, but I do also feel that the die is cast, to use the old cliche. I think we should just hope and pray, and those aren't empty words for any of us, that the plan works, that it seems to be. By the way, I think they've already changed. I think there are some astonishing people running the military operation. They've already changed their plan. Instead of a big blitz that everyone expected, I guess, was led to believe was going to be the case. And they said, wait, let's try this first. And they're trying their best. I think these are just unbelievable people. And that's not to do like one of those things.
Improvisers. Being a great improviser yourself, you admire that in your military leaders.
does matter how the war is conducted. It does matter how it's conducted. But the bigger questions are, what are we doing in this position? What are we doing in this position? You can't drop that, Bill. At the same time, you say to the troops, you're doing your duty. When you come back, we're going to have... Do you realize that what our veterans on the panel just before, it's $14 billion over the next 10 years that they're cutting out of benefits for veterans. I don't understand how this administration can talk about support the troops when most of the money that they're going to cut goes to tax cuts. 2/3 of it goes to tax cuts so Donald Trump can buy a second Lear jet. This makes no sense.
There is a connection.
Those are two thoughts then also. Sure, you can talk about the future. It's a disgrace to think that veterans would come back and not have the best of anything they need. But we still, at this moment, to me, I think the overwhelming issue is go and do this and trust the people who seem to be astonishing at what they're doing.
Well, all right. So let me ask you about the future then, because that's really what we're on to now, is what's going to happen there. What do you see a year from now? What is Iraq going to look like in a year, in 2 years?
Well, maybe we can create a vital democracy like Kuwait or Panama or Vietnam, North Korea.
You're saying we don't have a good track record.
Actually, no, we don't.
Yeah,
Actually, no.
We do have a kind of a history of thinking we'll get to a place and we think we'll get there and go, you'll love us. You're gonna love us. We're Americans. You're gonna love it. You're just gonna love it. But their ideas, I mean, certainly nobody living under Saddam Hussein, and by the way, I said in the show a few weeks ago that this has always been a 60-40 kind of a thing for me. These guys might be right, and as I say, now that we're doing it, I hope they are. And the 40 was that Saddam Hussein is such a huge pustule that it can't be all bad that we're getting rid of this guy. And no one would say, I think, that anyone lived under freedom in Iraq while Saddam Hussein was in charge. But isn't it also true that people's ideas of freedom are very different? And that we think that our idea of freedom is going to be the idea that they have of freedom, and it's not that way?
Well, but don't we have to give it a chance? I mean, we don't know. We have no idea what it's been like to know that if you know the demonstrations, they were saying this, just the Iraqis were saying this, the ones who are coming out saying, anytime there's a demonstration in the streets for Saddam, you know, they come into places and they know if they don't go out, well, they're at risk. Their families are at risk. It's an astonishing level. By the way, I also want to say very quickly about the human shields who are there, the folks who have gone there to make what they consider a moral stance there. As far as the way Iraq has been, I would really, I'm not being flippant now, I would like to see just one be a human shield in front of one of the torture chambers instead of just the oil wells. And if they found the oil wells, they can find the prisons there. And because these people have been living just in the most horrible brutality.
But, you know, a lot of the reasons we've gone into Iraq have sort of morphed over time, and it's become a lot lately about he is an intolerable tyrant. He's a thug who treats his people like this, which is absolutely true. We've known it for a long time. But there is a lot of people in the world who treat their people like that.
And we put half of them in office.
Yes, that's...
40 years ago, we put the Ba'ath Party and Saddam Hussein into Iraq.
But even saying if that's ancient history, what about right now? Now, in 60 Minutes about a month ago, they had a German doctor who had been to North Korea, and he said, when I grew up in Germany, all I heard was that nobody did anything while the Holocaust is going on. He said, it's going on right now in North Korea. There's 1 million people starving. That is a Holocaust. And there are many countries, Burma, for example, which is not even on most people's radar, where Saddam Husseins are in power and doing those kinds of things to their people. Now, if we are saying we're going to be the good guys and going to go around all around the world and kick every thug's ass, I'm all for it.
Same here, but let me tell you something.
But is that what we're saying?
I don't know, Bill. I find it hard to believe that an administration that uses Human Rights Watch reports and Amnesty International reports for toilet paper, they have never taken human rights seriously. Never. I mean, it's the argument of convenience. I hope it's true. I hope that we're now starting a new way of doing international policy, that we're actually going to pay attention to human rights. But it has never been at the top of anybody's list. It's always been strategic interest. Now, there's nothing